It started with a sound, a sudden cracking noise that echoed through the air, like something snapping inside my chest. I was driving home late at night, headlights flickering across the empty road, when my heart suddenly skipped, then raced uncontrollably. In those first 10 seconds, I felt something primal take over, an overwhelming sense that something was terribly wrong, like my body was quietly betraying me. There was no warning. One moment, I was thinking about a podcast I had just listened to, and the next I was convinced I was dying. Not metaphorically, not as a panic attack. I mean actually dying. My fingers clenched the steering wheel, my vision blurred, and my thoughts splintered like shattered glass. It was not pain that struck me first. It was fear. Pure, unfiltered, visceral fear, the kind that crawls into your bones and whispers, "This is it." And in that moment, I realized how completely unprepared I was to die. The next few hours blurred into a haze of fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and questions I could barely answer. I was in the emergency room, surrounded by the mechanical hum of controlled chaos. Nurses moved quickly and efficiently, but every second felt like an eternity. A cold EKG patch was slapped onto my chest. Blood was drawn. A doctor asked if I had a history of heart problems. I tried to speak, but my voice was stuck somewhere between panic and denial. I had always believed I was healthy. I ate right. I worked out. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the question, was I dying? I could feel the weight of my mortality pressing down like a suffocating blanket. I could not stop staring at the clock, as if time itself had become a countdown. In that sterile room, stripped of all the noise of my normal life, all I had left was my fear. And that fear felt enormous. It was not just fear of pain or hospitals. It was fear of the void. Fear of not existing. Fear of everything I had ever done being erased in an instant. I thought about my mother. I thought about the people I had not called in years. I thought about the things I said I would do one day, the dreams I kept on a shelf collecting dust. I realized I was not ready to die, not because I was afraid of death itself, but because I had not lived with the kind of urgency that dying demands. I watched as an older man was wheeled past my room. He was unconscious, tubes protruding from his mouth. His face was gray, lifeless, hollow. And I could not shake the feeling that I was looking at my future, or maybe my present. My brain flooded with every fear I had ever buried. Every funeral I had ever attended. Every night I had laid awake wondering what happens after this life ends. I had brushed against the edge of something enormous. Something eternal. And the worst part was how lonely it felt. You can be surrounded by people, by love, by everything you have ever built, and still feel utterly alone when death whispers your name. That night changed me. It carved something deep inside me. It introduced me to a fear that no amount of logic could quiet. Because once you truly understand that you are mortal, not in theory, but in the marrow of your bones, you're never the same again. Into the emergency room, surrounded by the mechanical hum of controlled chaos. Nurses moved quickly and efficiently, but every second felt like an eternity. A cold EKG patch was slapped onto my chest. Blood was drawn. A doctor asked me if I had a history of heart problems. I tried to speak, but my voice was stuck somewhere between panic and denial. I had always believed I was healthy. I ate right. I worked out. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the question, was I dying? After I left the hospital, everything looked the same, but felt completely different. The world had not changed, but I had. I started noticing every heartbeat, every twitch in my chest, every subtle sensation in my body that I had ignored before. I could no longer just exist without questioning my existence. I became obsessed with the idea of dying. I searched for answers in every corner of the internet, reading personal accounts of near-death experiences, scientific breakdowns of what happens to the brain during death, and philosophical debates about the afterlife. In my search for answers, I turned to everything: books, therapy, religion, meditation. I needed something to anchor me, something that could explain why this fear was gripping me so tightly. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in existential anxiety, and for the first time, I heard the words death anxiety spoken out loud in a way that did not feel clinical, but human. I remember her saying that fear is not a flaw, it is a message, and mine was telling me I was not living in alignment with what truly mattered to me. Months passed, and I started to believe I had found balance. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Until one day, everything came rushing back. I was hiking alone in the mountains far from cell service, chasing solitude and silence. The trail was steep, the sun was low, and I had misjudged how long the hike would take. I slipped. One misstep on loose gravel, and suddenly I was falling. It was only a few seconds, but in that moment, everything slowed down. I felt the weightlessness of my body in midair, the way my arms flailed for something to hold on to. Recovery took time, both physically and emotionally. I had fractured ribs, deep bruises, and a new scar across my back, but none of that compared to the imprint the experience left on my mind. I could not stop replaying it, the fall, the stillness, the peace. Something had shifted. I no longer feared death in the same way, but it had not disappeared. Instead, it had transformed into something more intimate. It became a companion, a reminder of how fragile everything is. I have developed rituals now, not superstitions, but habits that ground me. I wake up and write one thing I am grateful for. I walk barefoot in the grass whenever I can. I tell people I love them without waiting for the perfect moment. I still go to therapy. I still meditate. I try not to numb myself with distraction when the fear creeps in. I let it speak. Sometimes I journal what it says. Sometimes I just breathe and let it pass. I remind myself that fear is not failure. That to fear death is to understand life more deeply. And yet, there are moments that still shake me. A strange pain in my chest. A siren passing in the distance. The sudden silence in a crowded room. The fear never truly leaves. It waits. But now I have tools. Now I have a voice to speak back. I know that avoidance is not peace. That pretending I am invincible only makes the fear louder. So I choose honesty. I choose presence. I choose to keep going even when the fear returns. Because maybe that is courage. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to live anyway. So here I am. Alive. Still afraid sometimes. Still wondering what comes next. But I am no longer running. I think about death every day, but not as an enemy, more like an advisor. A quiet voice that asks me to look closely at how I spend my time. I do not know what happens after we die. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Maybe everything. But I know this. When you face death and survive, you are given a choice. You can shrink, or you can expand. I am trying to expand. To live bigger, love harder, and leave behind something that echoes after I am gone. But the truth is, death still terrifies me. It always will. And maybe that is the point. Maybe fear is not meant to be erased, but embraced. Held. Understood. It keeps me grounded. It keeps me grateful. It keeps me alive. So if you are watching this, and you have ever felt that cold grip of fear wrap around your chest, know this. You are not alone. And if you have never faced it, I hope you never have to. But if you do, I hope it wakes you up the way it woke me. Because death is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is where the real story begins.